Thanks for joining this session, which will be presented by Carl Jones, who's a colleague in Westminster School of Media and Communications. He's going to be talking about the experience on the final project module in PR and advertising and the impact that that has had on students. Carl tells me he's actually joining us from Mexico City, which is quite exciting for those of us stuck in the sort of gloom and doom of well, in my case, Northwest London. So I think the recording has now started. Carl thinks he's going to be talking for about 25 minutes, after which we'll have some time for questions, but do feel free to enter any burning issues you might have in the chat room, and then we'll have time for a discussion once Carl has finished his presentation. So over to you, Carl.
Great. Thank you very much, Tony. So welcome to today's session. And today I'll talk about the evolution of the PR and advertising final project module by bringing together theory and practice. And I'm going to focus on a 3-year undergrad module in the PR and advertising BA honors course that is housed within the Westminster School of Communication and Media. I will examine the course through 4 sections and then review the issue of preparing students for careers after university and the difficulty of having non-practicing academics teaching current practical career skills in order for the students to get a job. So the agenda for today's approximately 25-minute presentation is the following. First, I'm going to talk about the context, where and when. Then I'll talk about the situation, what and how. Then I'll go over outputs, so what, and then challenges, which are covering the problems. And then I'll end with a conclusion and a summary. But before I go into the main part of the talk, I would like to introduce myself. And I'm Carl Jones, senior lecturer in the PR and advertising undergrad course. And I'm also an advertising professional transitioning into academia. Basically, I'm an early career researcher who is also a senior lecturer. My personal branding identifies me as advertising, academia, and art. And it took me approximately 3 years of soul searching to identify those 3 areas that make up my personal brand. And this is how I identify myself when asked to do so. I have worked at various international ad agencies in Canada, Mexico, and the US, and as an art director for 9 years and as a vice president creative director for 15 years. I use a method called art through research to create art interventions, and I create art pieces based on my research. Then I attempt to get the artwork and its ideas into the public through writing articles or have art shows, or I do interventions where I place the artwork in unexpected places. Apart from the artwork, I write articles to inspire conversation around the difficult themes I am researching, which are racism and classism in advertising. Then I analyze the online conversation through content analysis. This is a further research method to understand what the Mexican public feels about the themes brought up around my artwork. The media that interviews myself and covers my research outputs are varied and based in Europe or the Americas, and they broadcast in either English or Spanish. And I also believe that advertising benefits humankind, and guests edited a Westminster journal called Advertising for the Human Good that was released early last year. And I'm furthering my research by doing a PhD at the Royal College of Art on decolonizing advertising, which sets out to redefine the concept of advertising through an analysis of the political economy of race in Mexico and its manifestations through the spectacle of advertising. So now let's start with the presentation. As mentioned in today's agenda, let's look at the first of the 4 sections. This one is called context, or where and when. And this is about the overall course and module that I'm focusing on today. Since I arrived in mid-2015 to work at the University of Westminster, I've been involved in the 3rd-year final project 24-week module for public relations and advertising. In 2015 and 2017, I was the co-module leader with Graham Don, and in 2018, I was the only module leader. So I took this opportunity to respond to the following: students' observations and comments in the mandatory module evaluation held in week 15, and my own observations on how to improve the module, along with the external examiner report. I was hired in August 2015 to be a full-time member of staff with an advertising background. Before I was hired, the PR and advertising course had only 2 full-time public relations teachers and no advertising ones. And I was given the task of introducing advertising into the overall PR and advertising course, and also into the individual core modules, including this one, the final project. The final project is where PR and advertising students demonstrate their learnings over the previous 2 years in the course core modules, where we teach learnings that form a toolbox, which the students can access and apply to any situation they encounter in the PR and advertising industries within various countries, various cultures, or different ideologies. It's important to note that over 70% of our students are non-UK nationals and are taking the course to experience the PR and advertising industries in one of the world's top communication centres. Here's a slide from our social media page with a post the students created themselves. As you can see, the graduating class of 2021 comes from 18 countries like the Americas, in Europe, Middle East, and the African continents. Now, the alumni, teachers, guests, lecturers, mentors, the students meet through this course bring their own life and career experience into the classroom and expose the students to past, current, and future ideas from around the globe. This creates a classroom environment that builds understanding through questioning and shared experiences. As students progress through the 3 years, they gain familiarity of working practice through internships within the creative industry, often in their home country, and they impart this newly acquired knowledge to their peers through formative assessments such as presentations. Now let's look at the actual module and the learning outcomes. One is implementing an integrated PR and advertising strategic campaign to a high professional standard, ability to present and defend practice-based decisions, research and focus on the specific subject matter in order to support the final output, engage critically in the business process, work individually on a practice-based solution to resolve an opportunity, and the importance of process. The final project prepares the third-year students for a future of continuous learning. What I tried to do throughout the 24 weeks is apply what academic David Nichol calls feedback interventions. And this is to enhance students' engagement in dialogue with teachers and with peers. And that should trigger a reflective process. This is in order to improve dialogue around the assessment brief and improve teacher, student, and peer conversations during and after the assessment creation. I created various stages and methods of feedback from a variety of sources during the whole assessment process: briefing, research, creation, presentation, to and after completion. Also, the actual assessment was explained in detail during the first class for over 1 hour and written up in detail along with how they were being assessed in the module handbook. The early and middle stages were formative and prepared the students for their pitch and written report, which was summative. The final project is taught over 2 semesters in the final year of study. The final project is an opportunity for students to make an extended original contribution to PR and advertising fields by outlining, developing, and pitching all aspects of a specific campaign, together with a critical analysis of the work they propose. Additionally, this individual project serves as a great addition to their portfolio as they seek their first job in the industry. The model's assessments are divided into 4 parts. The oral pitch, which is evaluated by an industry panel composed of 3 experts currently working in the culture industries of PR, advertising, journalism, or marketing, followed by a submitted 2,500-word written report displaying the evidence and research supporting the integrated campaign, and a 1,000-word critical analysis reflecting upon previous pitch and written report, and then the production of the degree show. The learning technologies within my teaching of the specific module are the following: that offer students InDesign and Photoshop classes in order to create the concept boards that are exhibited in the degree show. I invited a number of experts to come to specific labs where the students had individual attention and learned skills, such as software and online research, that would make them employable in the PR and advertising sectors. If students could not make the labs, they were then reminded that they could use the website LinkedIn Learning that was included with their tuition fee. LinkedIn Learning, formerly known as lynda.com, is a website that has over 3,000 videos that offer tutorials on how to operate software. Research and how to do it academically and through business practice using digital technology is also imparted through case study examples, invited alumni who come to the class, and a session with the University of Westminster Library. These technologies give the student real-life learning experience of creating a campaign in the same way it is created in the industries of PR and advertising. When I started with the redesign of this module, I looked at various teaching theories and applied them to its redesign, including Chickering and Zelda's 7 Principles of Good Learning and Chi and Hausman's Observing Dialogues Collaboratively. For the final project module, evidence-informed approaches and the outcomes from research, scholarship, and professional development were reflected by respecting the 7 principles explored by Chickering and Gamson. 1, encourages contact between students and tutors, and we had many weeks of individual tutorials throughout the module. 2, develops reciprocity and cooperation among students, and this is covered in formative exercises such as the mock pitch, where students present their research so far to each other before their actual summative pitch. 3, encouraging active learning, which happened weekly, actively engaging students with the course material through discussions, problem solving, case studies, and role plays. 4, give prompt feedback. So for example, in the mock pitches or individual tutor sessions, we were able to give the students immediate feedback. 5, emphasizes time on task, and what we did through this was through the mock and actual pitch presentations that were timed. Number 6 is communicate high expectations, and this was done through in-class lectures, module handbook assessments, description, and course alumni who were invited to come speak to the students, and they emphasize this when they come. And finally, respect diverse talents and ways of learning, and this is done because the final project allows students to express learnings through various methods, such as visual, written, and verbal. Now, I explored the principles through the module teaching assessment course design, and also by taking the students to leading London advertising agencies, Freud's or Hey Human, for the day. Here they are exposed to the various departments used to create a PR advertising campaign and see how the departments work together and inform each other. This allowed the students to understand the different roles they were assuming for the final project, which could be strategy or creative, and then how those ideas are presented to the client and various publics. Often during the agency's presentation, concept boards were shown to represent and explain individual campaigns created by the agencies. This, combined with the different departments explained their roles, prepared the students for their final assessment and allowed them to understand the benefit of completing the final project. As module leader, my global expertise was reflected in searching for a way to mirror the diversity of the students' ethnic backgrounds. This could complete their individual final project, they could complete their individual final project on the subject happening in their home country, such as increasing birth rates among teens in Colombia, or encouraging Chinese to visit museums in Beijing. This gave the students more freedom in researching in their own language and culture. Also, after I read the 2017 UNESCO Dellers report on the future of education on preparing students for lifelong learning, I wanted to add a tool called ethical communication. This was accomplished by reminding the students of the communication and media theories, such as the ones by Fuchs, Frankfurt School, Foucault, and McLuhan, and the negative effects of advertising and PR have on society, such as gender roles, algorithm bias, and racism and classism. So we also reminded the students about the theories that they were learning in other modules that were not core. An example of learning activities in week 3 was to get students to bring to class an artifact reflecting the issue they are considering exploring. First, they are asked to sit in a circle and discuss for 2 minutes their artifact and how it represents an issue or problem. After all the students have spoken, they then can ask questions and challenge each other. This guides the students into considering relevant issues such as organ donation versus selling a bottle of Coca-Cola. And formative feedback complemented the students' comments. This exercise is based on the Chi and Hausman's Observing Dialogues Collaboratively, where the students learn from each other and gain insight about human tutoring effectiveness from vicarious learning. One thing that the final project module did not offer the students was a professional experience of creating a project from start to finish within a PR or advertising agency. The solution was to have the students pitching their final project in front of an industry panel. The actual experience gave the students an idea of the various types of personalities they would face and how to conduct themselves in a non-academic situation. Some of the learnings gained by the students were real-life business processes obtained in academic study applied to actual practice, and a critical observation from leaders in the cultural industries. Having industry experts as part of the grading process gave the students a different form of evaluation, as the invited panel made up of industry experts are not influenced by learning outcomes and assessed the students on real-world conditions. This evaluation process we call bi-valuation, which complements the appraisal by the lecturers who evaluate the student against learning outcomes, benefiting the student because they receive both academic and industry appraisal, giving a more rounded and extended experience. An example of bi-valuation would be answering questions posed by an expert in a time-controlled, real-world simulated business meeting. The final grade is given by the academic lecturer. However, the academic lecturer reviews the comments of the invited practitioners. In this picture, I have the four main academics who were involved in the teaching of the overall course versus the invited industry panel from this year's, who are practitioners from the PR and advertising industries. Also, I'm illustrating how the academics teach the theories over the 3 years, and the practitioners demonstrate their application in the business world. Outputs. I will now go into detail on the main outputs from the 2-semester module. The pitch deck, which includes the 2,500 word written report and panel pitch, the critical reflection, and the degree show. So now let's focus on the pitch deck. A material output that is practiced within the PR and advertising industry is the pitch deck. This is a document produced in the PR and advertising industries that holds the information presented in meetings where a concept is pitched. This document also holds more detailed information that was referred to in the meeting, but was not enough time to go into detail, such as surveys, reports, research, press releases, etc. The pitch deck was produced by the students as a leave behind after their pitch in week 15 and handed to the industry panel members as the students finished presenting. The students can now use this when they go on interviews to demonstrate their strengths and receive feedback from professionals. The industry panel used this artifact as part of their evaluation of the students' strategic research and output. After the industry pitch, the students were required to write a 2,500 word report reflecting their research and thought process, supporting every decision made with research and theoretical theories learned over the previous 2.5 years. The next output, after the pitch and the 2,500 word written report, the second phase of the module is a critical assessment where there is a process of self-evaluation at the conclusion of the project. The 1,000-word assessment objectively asks the students to explore the approach taken, analyze industry panel comments, and assess the merits and disadvantages of their proposed campaign. It asks them to not only delve into the past, but importantly, it asks them to speculate about what might have been. Even though this assessment mimics the debriefing meeting performed in business practice, it is measured against academic learning outcomes. The final output of the module is phase 3, the creation, production, and promotion of the degree show, where for the first time the course and the students are able to showcase individual expertise over 15 days to visiting public, family, friends, alumni, industry. This is in a gallery located within the university's Harrow campus, and due to the pandemic, the degree show moved online. The final phase allowed the students to see the work of their peers, and this triggered, as theorized by Nicole D., a reflective process. So I'm just going to show you some images of the degree show. This is an ad that the students produced themselves, and this ran in our course social media pages on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and Weibo. Here is the opening night party that we had. So we had the opening night, I think it was May 17th, and then the students who were located all around the world and teachers got together and had a drink or a brindis or a cheers to celebrate the opening. Now, this is the gallery we normally hold the degree show, and this is the first degree show that we had in I believe it was 2019. And the students, some were very talented and played music and sang. Others invited, they got sponsors, so they were able to get food and money donated. Well, not money, but they got products donated, and then they exchanged branding, so that we advertised the brands that we showed, that we gave food of on our social media feeds, and then the brands advertised our degree show on their social media feeds. And here are some examples of the advertising campaign done this year that was done on the different social medias that we have. Now, during the degree show, we held an industry night where the students would stand by their work as prospective employers from the communication industry would walk around and ask students questions on their work and possibly hire them, delivering a real-world experience that is not measured against learning outcomes or controlled by an academic environment. During the pandemic, this could not be done physically, so the students invited future possible employers to see their work through digital invitations and hyperlinks. What the students show in the degree show is called a concept board, which is basically their campaign showing the issue or problem and their integrated campaign solution. Here I'm going to show you different concept boards. So here we have a girl who decided that her client was SpaceX, and she created the campaign to promote the first astronaut on Mars, and that it be a woman. This next student created this campaign during the pandemic, and it was to work with, I think it's Currys, the electronics store, and they designed a campaign that would bring used laptops and pads to students in need who didn't have the money to own these digital devices. The following student created a campaign in China, and this is for a wand-sized wireless bra. This student created a campaign from Shiseido about creams that manage maskne, which is acne that you get from wearing a mask too much. Then this student here worked with the United Nations in their campaign and created a campaign about refugees and refugee power. And this student herself was an escaped refugee from Syria. And then finally, I'm showing a campaign that was done regarding miscarriages. And this student linked that campaign with the brand Tommy's. So as you can see, the student work reflects both the practice of PR and advertising, also reflects the academic media and communication theories that they have learned. The final result is an integrated campaign. The degree show challenged the students to delve into their toolkit to produce an event with measurable outcomes. It was a success in terms of student satisfaction. However, it was not a success in terms of having industry guests come, as the gallery is in Harrow, far away from the central hub of London. The students realized the difficulty of contacting and interacting with this difficult-to-meet target group. However, the pandemic inspired the online degree show, and now the students can contact future employers digitally and send a link to their exhibited work. So now let's examine some of the challenges faced with our final year module. As academics, we are industry experts who are modeling the industry practice with the restraints or within the restraints of an academic environment. In addition to teaching skills that the students mimic, we try to give them opportunities to apply the tools and techniques by interacting with actual industry practitioners through meeting alumni and panel judges. The students are given opportunities to practice what their teachers preach, as in the degree show or pitch. One issue that I've discovered in my short time in academia in North America and UK is the trend of universities only hiring lecturers with a PhD. And these academics may not have actual industry experience in the practice they are teaching. I have done some social listening and looked at different posts placed on the internet. Here you can see a post that says that in the UK it is generally considered that to be a teacher in the university a person needs a PhD. Of course, that is not true for all fields, but most of them. Or here, This is in the Times, and this teacher was told to get a PhD, and we're hearing more and more of that. And this is based on an article that was written in 2012. However, this has been rewritten and says that it will be the norm and expectations that academics will need a PhD. In the world of advertising, so let me just talk quickly, sorry, about my case of getting the job at Westminster. I was lucky that in the world of advertising, the number of people with a PhD is both low in the UK and Canada. So when applying for a job in this field, it appears very few people have a PhD, and less if they want to switch to academia. So I was lucky enough to get a job without one. Those that do get a job teaching PR and advertising with a PhD are often academics who haven't worked for a long time in PR or advertising field, so don't have updated practice experience or none at all. They have learned about the practice from books. For example, a university hiring staff who have a PhD in advertising but have not had the experience of working for an extended period within an advertising agency. This deprives the students from having a mentor who or is active in the industry and can bring current agency practice and their own personal career experience into the classroom. Also, as the students are encouraged to work in internships, they have current experience in the industry. And if an academic has not had extensive work experience within a particular industry, they cannot answer students' questions with conviction. How to solve the issue of academics not having current practical experience? Well, with the current PR and advertising final project, we did the following. We invited course alumni to speak to the students about their current job and their final project. We took the students to visit local advertising and public relations agencies, and we introduced current practitioners into the classroom and had them as part of the evaluation process. This process allows the students to be better prepared for why they're in higher education institutions in the first place, to gain cutting-edge knowledge from practitioners in order to obtain a position in the PR and advertising industries. The combination of academics who reinforce the theory of communication and media and the theory behind the practice, combined with the current practitioners, bringing actual demonstrated practice skills into the classroom. This combination produced ethically minded students who are aware of the consequences of their communications. This is through learning both the practice of PR and advertising and the theories of communication and media, leading to students who are prepared to work in the creative industries. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. Here's the bibliography I used. And if anybody has any questions, Tony, that will be great. I can take them now.
Okay, thank you very much, Carl, for a fascinating insight into your experience over the last few years. I'm going to invite people to either just raise their hand and ask questions or post their questions into the chat. But I've got an opening question for you, Carl, because it seems to me, listening to your presentation, that a recurring theme throughout the sort of the challenges that you've faced is this kind of balance between the theory and practice in advertising and PR. And I'm just wondering that specifically on this project, the way that students were assessed on the project, was it based essentially on the output of the project, or was it based on the process? Because clearly the process involves the application of the theory, but there is a temptation to see a fantastic pitch or a fantastic end product that was the output of the process. And as tempting as it may be to have, to award high marks to a student who do a wonderful pitch or a wonderful presentation, how do you gauge what students are learning?
Well, great question. Thank you. So the students have a lot of face-to-face time with individual tutors. So in the lead up to their pitch, they will have individual meetings with one of their assigned supervisors. And that happens in the first semester and the second semester. The final mark is not based on the pitch. The pitch is, I think, 20% of that first assessment. So the students have to submit a pitch deck as well as do the pitch, and they have to submit the 2,500-word written report. In that written report, the student puts in their evidence and they explain their process of getting to where they have. So we are aware of what they've done through the process, and also we're evaluating what they have said and put into their written report. So they could have an excellent pitch, but then their written report will not reflect proper research or proper argument that they have done to create their actual campaign. So in answer to your question, it's not all based on having a fantastic pitch. That is only worth 20% of the 70% that assessment one is worth. Does that answer your question,
Yeah,
Tony?
it absolutely does. Yeah, thank you, Carl. I see that John has got his hand up. John?
Yeah, hi Tony, hi Carl. Thanks Carl for a really interesting talk again. As always, I'm really interested to hear how you've coped with in PR and advertising, and I'm impressed at how you've kind of aligned the current context of working remotely to how the industry is also coping with working remotely too. But my question was about, or my comment was about, yeah, sort of matching this academic rigor with the industry expectations and continuing kind of pressure that we have on visiting lecturers. And you kind of answered it in your talk. So my question sort of then evolved into, does this now rely on the kind of goodwill and the engagement and the willingness to give freely from the industry and engaging with the current student cohort, if you follow me?
Yeah, interesting question, John. So the module is fully controlled by academics. It's just my issue, what I learned teaching in Canada and then here in London, is just that because I'm now an academic and researching, I'm not inside an agency knowing what the current trends are and what's happening. So that's a deficit I've realized that we as academics studying but not actually practicing need to deal with. So my concept was to create ties with the industry. Now, the industry, we don't pay the judges that come in or the alumni that come in. We ask them if they would like to. They also, though, they benefit because I do have conversations with them, and they benefit because they get to see the education system and what students are learning. They are very interested in looking at people to hire for their agencies, and our students that are often hired by the judges. So there is a trade-off. It's not like the judges are just sort of donating their time for their own good. They benefit. They also get to see how, because our course integrates PR and advertising, but the industry is not integrated.
Yeah.
So we're ahead. We're ahead of the curve. So also the industry is being educated about the way we see how PR and advertising are similar. Does that answer your question, John?
It sort of does, but I think I would imagine this is a kind of a cross school or a cross college kind of issue that we all have with this kind of maintaining the balance between the academic side and the continuing pressure that we have on part-time visiting lecturer hours that give kind of currency to a lot of what we're doing across the disciplines.
Yeah. Yes, you're totally right there. And we also have in the School of Media and Communication the new degree, which is digital media.
Yeah.
And that new degree is very practice oriented. It seems like there is theory, but we are teaching the skills they're going to be making. You know, it seems that the degree, and that's where students want to go, is making and creating. Because now with the digital world, we have a lot of free applications. We don't need to know Photoshop. We can just download an app where we just press a few buttons and it does the Photoshop for us, if you know what I mean. Or there are websites like Canva that have templates for different campaigns in different medias and platforms. So, and that's what students seem to be wanting to going. So it's very, I think, important for us as academics also to be very in tune with current practices within the industry?
Sure, but there again, you've got this tension between the sort of the technical, the practice, and the kind of academic criticality of what we're doing at university. And I'm always really impressed with what you're doing with PR and advertising, of engaging critically with what that is as a discipline. So yeah, fantastic to hear you, Carl, and I look forward to further conversations.
Great, thanks very much, John. I appreciate it.
Thanks, John. And Mohammed has got a question.
Thank you, Carl. Very, very enjoyable presentation. My question relates to the motivating students, particularly those who are not disciplined in terms of time management and so on. So as a final year project coordinator and a supervisor, I find that despite the fact that we present a very structured module, we provide all the support and regular sessions in terms of report writing, etc. Nevertheless, getting the students sometimes just to turn up to their project meetings or indeed to these support sessions is a challenge. And I'm talking about the sort of those of modest abilities or who are less motivated. What tips can you give me from your experience to try and get more people to engage, more students? Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're welcome, Mohammed. Great question. You know, there's two answers. One is, before COVID and then after COVID, because we had issues. One is getting the students physically with you, in front of you in the classroom, and then the other one was doing it online during the pandemic. And I think it was the same through both. One thing we did, there's a module, there's a person that works with me on the module, her name's Eleutheria, and she comes from a marketing background. So at the beginning of the module, we had a special talk and lecture on project management. So because we had identified that students did have time management issues. So we showed them, Eleutheria focused on giving them tips on how to manage their project, which was their final project, with their work and their personal lives. So that was one way. And then the other is we encourage the students to talk amongst themselves and learn from each other. So we encourage them to have a WhatsApp group without a teacher involved, so that they would talk to each other that way. And we found that the students can peer pressure each other as well. So there are key students within your cohort, within your class, that we would sort of emphasize certain points with, and then hoping that they would then emphasize those points through the student communication channels that we were not in charge of. So that was basically what we had. Of course, Mohammed, there are students who are having challenges accessing digital devices to come to meetings or to physically go to class. So we try to use personal tutoring because we also personal tutor those same students. So we would, as teachers, we would alert each other about certain students were having issues, and then we approach that student directly. So those are the way we handled it. Of course, there are students who fall through the cracks, sadly, and no matter what you do, getting laptops for them or whatever, they just fall through.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, that's very, very useful. I mean, one thing just to sort of point out, something that I've used in project-based modules is sometimes to break a project into milestones or different phases. And that kind of works, but of course it increases your workload and so on. But your suggestion about the WhatsApp group and peer pressure is a great one. Thank you.
No, you're welcome, Mohammed. And I think the milestones is a good idea, because what it does is take this huge project and make it into biteable chunks. You know, how do you eat an elephant? Well, you eat it slowly and in little pieces, you know? And
exactly.
I think that's a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Mohammed. Does anyone else have any final questions? Because we're getting close to the end of the session now. The final plenary begins at 3:45, but maybe there's just time for a final comment if anyone has one. Okay, well, Looks like you've covered everything then, Carl. So can I thank you, Carl, for your insights? It was really interesting. Thanks very much for sharing that with us, and thanks everyone for participating. So as I say, the final session starts at 3:45, and that's with Sal Jarvis and Andy Pitchford. So I'll stop recording now, and